Nationalism was one of the driving forces behind the world wars. It defined 19th, 20th, and to the extent the 21st centuries. But without it, several of the world's major powers wouldn't exist as we know them today. According to Britannica, nationalism is an ideology based around the premise that an individual's loyalty should be around his or her nation state and or ethnic group. Throughout history, many political groups made use of this to achieve their own ends. But here's a question for you. Have you ever felt an innate sense of loyalty to the group you fall under? Have you ever studied formation of nation states like Germany or researched the breakup of Austria-Hungary and Yugoslavia? If you have, then you know the effect that nationalism had on the world. It can be a driving force across the world for countries to be formed. And according to the U.S. Office of the Historian, a government website, it was a major driving force behind the formation of Germany. And this all started with the conquest of Germany by Napoleon. See, Napoleon was at war with all of Europe at this time, and he dismantled the Holy Roman Empire, which was the political enemy of Germany for centuries. This left a power vacuum which he promptly filled with the Confederation of the Rhine. As brief as the Rhine was, it did create a rise in nationalism further, as it gave Germans the idea that they could be in a unified state that they could call their own. And this got popular sentiment in the Kingdom of Prussia, which wanted to make a popular German state. So, the Kingdom of Prussia, under the leadership of its king and Otto von Bismarck, they conquered or peacefully took much of Germany up into the Franco-Prussian War, in which Prussia and its German allies defeated the French and declared themselves to be the German Empire. But this isn't the only cause that effect that nationalism can do. Although it can make nations, it can also start wars. See, as nationalism grew and spread, different types sprung up. This type that I'll be talking about right now is the ones that sprung in the Balkans, which was more about the ethnic group of the individual. See, at this time, the major power that was controlling the Balkans was this empire called Austria-Hungary, the Austro-Hungarian Empire. And among its population was large amounts of Slavic minorities. And each of these Slavic minorities wanted their own ethnic state. And this culminated in 1914 to 1918 when the nationalistic terror group known as the Black Hand, which is a Serbian group, assassinated the Austrian Archduke Franz Ferdinand. And this kicked off the First World War, which killed millions, men, women, and children, and remains to this day one of the bloodiest wars in human history. And according to Margaret Macmillan in History Bit, if nationalism wasn't a factor in Austria-Hungary, the country itself could survive up to this day. And nationalism is the primary reason why it fell. But also, while it can bring countries together, it can also break them apart more. Austria-Hungary, well, it started the war. It started the First World War, but it can start small wars too, and also break countries apart like Austria-Hungary. See, it's also responsible for breaking up Yugoslavia. Yugoslavia was a Balkan state that controlled much of the Balkans to the early 90s. And well, it was pretty similar scenario with Austria-Hungary. A bunch of the minorities there wanted their own ethnic states. The Croats wanted to Croatia, Bosnians went to Bosnia, Serbia went to Serbia. And this culminated, according to the USIP, this culminated into the destruction of Yugoslavia from internal troubles and created a humanitarian crisis as ethnic groups are fighting ethnic groups for their own countries. Because nationalism dictated that they must have their own ethnic state that on their ethnicity can live in. And while it came to show that it can be a uniting force, but it can also be a destructive force as well. It can discriminate. It can be used in populism and strongman politics. But it can also be used for good. It can unite entire groups, like with the Germans, and create major world powers, which the Republic of Germany, to this day, is a major world power. But in review, I'd like to say that the fact that it's had the formation and breakup of nations with the First World War is both good and bad. But when you hear the word nationalism, think about the historical implications of what that word means. Think of it as two sides of the same coin. Thank you for listening to my speech.